Broadcasting live from Tendo's Ice Bridge on the plain of Kamigawa, this is Tap Tap Concede. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Tap Tap Concede. I am James, here with
Cameron.
Everybody else is, I don't know, doing other things, so it's just me and Cameron, and I hit his stuff, I'm sorry.
My stuff.
This week, we have a very special guest, Hugh Starwipe and Dan Emmons. You didn't do the hand thing.
I didn't want to do the hand thing, man.
Ugh,
all right,
you're the worst.
We're going to start.
Yeah, we're going to start. We're going to start this narrative.
I'll do the hand thing now, and then I'll just trust that you have the editing magic to make it work.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
All right, we'll add it in post.
All right, Dan, who are you? Why are you here today?
Oh my god, hold on. All right, great. I am a former designer of the design team for Magic the Gathering R&D, and I worked on Dragons of Tarkir.
Ooh,
which was pretty sweet, a cool set. I did a bunch of other sets for Magic. The hell did I work on? I don't remember.
Return to New Phyrexia?
You're just going to try and bait me and everything? Just like...
Basically, yes.
Yeah, okay.
This is
that
bait
set
Dan
where
Emmons.
that card is that's super powerful? Remember that one?
Yeah, the set where you reprinted GT?
Yeah, remember that one?
Yeah.
That was my favorite set that you did.
That's going to be a good set. So Dan has been with us, I think, once or twice before.
Yep.
But it's been a little while since we last talked and realized that, hey, he was on the design team for Dragons of Tarkir. And, hey, Dragons of Tarkir was released yesterday. So this should be a timely discussion.
Yeah, we can talk about things and stuff.
Yeah, things and stuff. But first, we need to do the Crack-A-Pack.
Oh, my goodness.
We have our giant dice. We have our big stack of Magic cards. Would you like to roll it, Cam?
Please.
Cam is very excited to roll the dice. Here we go.
Oh my god, I've never been allowed to.
Is it the gigantic D20?
It absolutely is. 13.
Lucky 13.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9,
no
10,
whammies.
11,
Come on.
12, 13. Scars of Mirrodin.
Ooh. All right.
Which was given to us by Robert at PAX East.
Thank you, Robert.
Radian, I think, might be his username.
All right.
Thank you so much, Robert, for seeing us at PAX East. That was a lot of fun. We got a lot of packs at PAX East. I think we've said this before, but there was people were incredibly generous. So let us crack in to this first pack.
All right.
First up, Fume Spitter.
All right. This is
for 1 and a black. You get a creature horror. It's a 1/1. Sacrifice Fume Spitter. Put a -1/-1 counter on target creature.
I mean, isn't this usually a goblin that does this effect?
It's kind of like kind of like a weird black goblin.
It's kind of like a goblin. It's one of those things that I always like the little cards like that. I would never first pick that card, I don't think, but I like that card more than most just because I like playing with the proliferate mechanic in the set. So.
And also, oh right. Also, being able to sack him at will.
Yeah,
it's pretty fun.
Yeah, somebody tries to O-ring. Oh no.
Oh god. All right, next up, Tel Jalad Fallen. 2 green for a 3/1. It's an elf warrior. It has protections from artifacts, and it has Infect. So Infect was a pretty big mechanic in Scars. And I recall this guy being not super great, but I could be wrong. Guys, what do you think?
I think he was pretty solid. Like,
yeah,
was he?
Putting 3 poison.
He died to a lot of things, and like 4 mana, 1 toughness is always a pain. But having the ability to, like, if you can get him through, right? Like, if all they have are artifact creatures, like, he kills you really quick.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Because
And
Infect is 10
3
poison counters, so it's essentially a 6/1.
Yeah, putting 3 counters on a creature also.
Yeah, he trades very well.
Yeah.
It's true. Not much. All right. Oriok Sun Chaser. 1 and a white for a 1/1. It's a human soldier. It has Metalcraft, which reads, as long as you control 3 or more artifacts, Sun Chaser gets +2/+2 and has flying.
The Metalcraft decks in this format, if I remember correctly, were super powerful. This guy was not the best Metalcraft guy you could get, but if you had the Metalcraft deck, this guy was really, really good in it.
Yeah, it seems pretty solid. I mean,
2 mana, 3/3 flyer.
Yeah, that seems very, very good. So
Yeah, you just go like Mox Opal.
you just go you just go
dream
Mox.
real big, Cam.
Yeah.
You just go Mox, and then Sunchaser.
Yeah.
But then your opponent goes Shatter.
No.
For 1 in a red, destroy target
You
artifact.
realize the Mox in this set is legendary for a reason, right?
Yeah. Quiet you.
We're going to open one, I swear.
Yeah. So Shatter was a pretty good card in this set. I mean, this set was pretty heavily dominated by artifacts, which I can tell you is our next card. So
that was Rosewater's favorite trick was put cards that are usually borderline that are actually amazing in different formats. So like I think Terror in the original Meriden, Terror was in the set and Shatter was in the set because he knew that Shatter would be amazing and that Terror would be mediocre.
Yeah.
Awesome.
When it's normally the other way around, so.
Yes. One of my favorite artifacts.
Buddy.
Perilous Mirror.
Oh, he's so cute.
Yeah, he's adorable. 2 colorless mana for a 1/1, which is meh, but when Perilous Mirror is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, it deals 2 damage to target creature or player.
Does Cam need to see the rest of this pack, or have we chosen our pick?
Well, I mean, clearly right now it's I could probably just rip the rest of these cards, and it's going to be Perilous.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible there's a foil Perilous Mirror.
Okay, fair.
In which case we feel like idiots.
That's true.
Yeah, that would be pretty unfortunate.
I didn't actually see what it was, but there's a foil artifact.
Oh, boy.
We could get there. All right.
Big.
Bladed Pinions. 2 colorless mana for an artifact equipment. The equipped creature has flying and first strike. It equips for 2.
I don't remember how crowded the skies were in this set.
Not particularly. I don't think it was rarely worth spending a card to do it, but you could definitely get the deck like with the Blade Tribe Berserkers, like for example, that are just like big Metalcraft beaters that you might want to back into this card. But I don't think you're ever like super happy playing this card unless your deck is like insane.
All right.
Yeah.
Scoria. Is it Scoria? Scoria Elemental. 4 and a red for a 6/1. That's it.
Yeah. I'm glad they it's almost like a ball lightning.
It's so close.
It's so close.
So many of the things on the card are kind of like ball lightning.
Like Elemental
It's
and
an Elemental,
6/1.
and it's red.
And that's about it.
Yeah.
This card wasn't very good, right? No.
It's
a
like
6/1.
any card like this in general just almost always trades down. Like it's really hard to trade that guy for a 4-drop or higher. And there's actually a good number of cards in this set that do a single -1/-1 counter. So cards that have 1 toughness tend to be pretty dangerous to play. So you end up getting caught a lot more often than you'd like with that card.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Next up, we have Untamed Might. It's an X spell, X and a green. Target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn. It is an instant.
This card is pretty dumb.
Pretty dumb?
Yeah, it's
dumb.
Dumb good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. I need to be more.
No,
it's
pretty ridiculous because it's just like attack in and then might whatever doesn't get blocked or.
Well, it's like it's always a pump spell that's going to be big enough for you to win a combat, and it's usually it's not very mana efficient, right? You need to pay 3 mana to Giant Growth, but it just has the benefit of being able to just kill you out of nowhere, especially with the infect creatures in the set. Like if you're ever playing infect, if you ever have like a couple of infect creatures in your deck, you like Untamed Might is just a way to just blow somebody out of a game.
It's the green fireball, right?
I mean, in this set it is kind of.
Yeah. All right, next up is the Screeching Silcaw. For 1 and a blue, you get a 1/2 flyer.
Hey, Stormcrow.
It has Metalcraft, which says whenever Screeching Silcaw deals combat damage to a player, if you control 3 or more artifacts, the player puts the top 4 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard.
I've definitely been milled out by this guy.
Really? Yeah, I guess limited environment. Yeah, okay.
Like 4 cards is a lot. It's if you don't like get the deck right, like this card is real bad.
Yeah.
Certainly no Stormcrow, but like it. Oh, I can't even keep a straight face.
It's like, wait a minute, isn't this just Stormcrow with an upside?
Quite you.
I don't know what you're. It's just strictly better.
Dude, yeah. All right. Look, man. What if they're playing Delve, dude?
Yeah, no, then you can't say strictly better.
That's true. You're right.
Get correct.
Oh my! This card, Clone Shell. 5. It's an artifact creature, shapeshifter. 5 colorless mana for 2/2. It has imprint. When Clone Shell enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library. Exile 1 face down, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. When Clone Shell is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, turn the exiled card face up. If it's a creature card, put it onto the battlefield under your control. That was a lot of text, but
I like how you sighed before you read the text of this card, but when I was last on the show, we opened a feature site pack, and that was just like infinity more text than this, so...
That's true.
You're like, I don't know if you're getting old or something, but...
It's more that I sighed at imprint. I remember when so when we all came back to this game, this was a set that was just coming out.
Yeah.
And we were sort of at the tail end of Zendikar. It was late 2010. It was a good time in my life. And then I read imprint, and I couldn't grasp this concept for some reason. I don't know. There was another... the Mimic Vat?
Yeah, Mimic Vat.
Mimic Vat is another card that I never really understood for the first little while that I played Magic. I was like, I don't get it. What's going on with this card?
No, I remember looking at Mimic Vat and going, do something. You're so close to being, just do it. Just work.
So, Clone Shell, was this card good?
Nah, I mean, not really. 5 mana for a 2/2 is a lot, and if you whiff on getting a creature in the top 4, this card is real bad.
Yeah.
But like, it's an artifact, and artifacts are get a little bit of a bump anyway because of Metalcraft. And sometimes it's a 5 mana 2/2 that dies into another creature from your deck. But I think it was a little bit too hit or miss to be a high pick.
Yeah, I kind of like that it impulses for a creature, because taking one from your hand could be kind of card disadvantage, but you just whiff and feel so awful.
Yeah, you're just the saddest person on planet Earth.
Yeah.
All right, well, we're one uncommon in, and Perilous Mirror is still our pick, so let's keep going. Next up, Twisted Image. 1 blue for an instant. Switch target creature's power and toughness until end of turn, and the best 3 words in Magic, draw a card.
This card did not kill a lot of things, but when it did, it was the best.
Yeah. And you get to draw a card.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it replaces itself pretty easily. I remember going up against this card quite a bit whenever I played, so...
It is not a bad filler card. You're very rarely going to get value out of it, but it always cycles, and sometimes, they attack you with a 2/4, and you have a 3/3, and then you can use it to trade for their 2/4 or something, or you could swap the power toughness of their Tiljalad, fall in and block with a 3/3 or something. And...
All right, next up is the Mirror Smith. It is a human artificer, 1 and a white for a 2/1. Whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1 colorless. If you do, put a 1/1 colorless mirror artifact creature token onto the battlefield.
I remember this guy being really good.
She seems very, very, very strong.
The card is no jokes. You're, especially because the white Metalcraft decks tend to be very good. You end up in a lot of oh, what's that? You need 3 artifacts? Here, let me double all artifacts that you play. Also, give you tokens. Also, I'm a 2 mana 2/1, so I'm a good creature.
Yeah. All right. Our foil was not the foil Perilous Mirror as we hoped. It was a foil Flight Spellbomb, which for 1 colorless got you an artifact, and you sacrifice it to give target creature flying until end of turn. And when Flight Spellbomb is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if you do pay 1 blue, you draw a card. I can't talk apparently right now. Blah 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 blah. Draw a card is what I'm trying to say. Pay a blue, draw a card. So the Spellbombs were a cycle.
Yes, they were callbacks to the old Mirrodin set where they had Spellbombs that were 1 mana that were colored mana, sacrifice it, do an effect, and then 1 colorless mana, sacrifice it, draw a card. So these are you get to have your cake and eat it too. In this case.
Mm-hmm.
All right,
but much weaker cards in general, except for Nile Spellbomb. I think
Nile Spellbomb was just pretty dumb, I think, just for constructed. Like, I mean, they all cycled. Like Horizon Spellbomb, if you were playing some kind of ramp deck, was actually pretty decent, just because it was card advantage.
Oh, right.
Trying to remember what the other ones did. The red one was Camp Block.
The white one put a mirror token into play, I think.
Yeah.
So you got to keep up your... You got like an instant speed blocker,
Yeah,
I guess.
yeah. It was just like 1 mana 1/1 draw card that was an artifact, so that helped you with your Metalcraft, which wasn't the worst. Certainly wasn't the best.
Mm-hmm.
All right, are we ready for our rare?
Is it broken
We
in
are.
half? Because a lot of the rares are broken in half and limited.
It's an artifact.
Okay.
Come on, Wormcoil.
It starts with an S.
No.
Semblance
No.
Anvil.
All right. Rip.
3 colorless. It has imprint. When Semblance Anvil enters the battlefield, you may exile a non-land card from your hand. Spells you cast that share a card type with the exiled card cost 2 colorless less to cast.
I remember really wanting this card to be good and constructed. I remember just like, there's got to be some kind of combo that I can do with this and go off. There was not. Spoiler alert.
Many nights were lost.
Basically.
We did not get there.
Yeah.
All right, well,
No, but you can play all your mirror for free. Right?
all right. Well, thank you again, Robert, for the pack of Scars of Mirrodin.
And
It
for
was
the
fun
first big Perilous Mirror, apparently.
and
Yeah.
for the first pick Perilous Mirror, because that is basically what we're taking here, and I'm
Yeah.
happy for it.
It basically kills everything in the pack.
Yep. All right. Let us move on to our main topic, which is Dragons of Tarkir. Before we get into the cards that Dan designed and the Planeswalkers and all that sort of fun, very specific stuff, I thought we would take a sec to talk about sort of the process of developing a set of Magic cards, because it's not just, it's not like it's a couple guys on a team that create the whole set from start to finish. There's design teams and development teams and all sorts of people who sort of have their hands in the set. Mm-hmm. So if you can just take a couple of minutes to sort of quickly TLDR us through the...
TLDR it. Yeah, I'm going to miss a lot of people then.
That's fine. Just sort of a general overview of sort of...
Sure. So recently what happened was they started doing advanced planning, which essentially was, or exploratory design. I forget which one they call it. Where you get a team of designers and a developer and a creative person together, and then you just plan out a set, 2 years in advance, or a year before the design team even starts. So that is where you start collecting a bunch of ideas. You try out mechanics in a very general sense. Trying to think of mechanics that we picked up from there. I was on that team for a little while. Oh my god, I can't even remember. Manifest came out of that meeting. That was that team. That was basically a pie in the sky. Let's figure out a bunch of mechanics and see what works. And generate a bunch of mechanics. Not all of them made it, obviously, but it was just like a, hey, here are the problems you're going to have when you make this set type of team. Like just planning it out ahead of time. Then the set goes to the design team where you're actually generating the card file. You're generating all of the mechanics. So they are responsible for figuring out what is the set going to be like, what mechanics are we going to use, what themes are going to be in the set. So it was the design team's decision to do, for example, in cons, the design team decided we're going to have 5 clans. They're going to be 3 color. We're going to have these mechanics in there. Basically, they were trying to do they're doing the higher level like ideas. It's less about specific cards in the design team and more about the structure of the set. The way you can think of it is like a house. Like the design team will build the structure, the what's the word I'm looking for?
The superstructure,
the frame.
Thank you. Yeah, the frame.
The frame.
And then after they get depending on the size of the set, they get a bunch of time to do that, and they'll come up with an entire finished card file, and then they'll pass it over to a completely different team. So there's a design team leader who sort of builds the set, and then they have a team around them of people to help them build the set. And then the set is handed off to a development team, which is game balance, essentially. And it has a completely different lead. And in that team, that lead has full control over the set. And their job is to essentially take what the designers took and make it fun and make sure that it's balanced in every format that people play. So they're doing all of the draft tweaking, they're doing all of the constructed tweaking, they're taking all these mechanics and double checking them. That's the other thing that, like, it's very hard for when you are making mechanics and you are doing things and you're working with a set for so long. Sometimes it's very hard to get the the 1,000-yard view and say, like, yes, my mechanic is not good in these ways, or this thing that we thought was very obvious were not in fact obvious to other people. So it's kind of unique in game design in that terms, in that the product has a different owner from at different points in the thing that have different final says. So, like, the design team is still involved, but it's getting this other team involved with a completely different person in charge that helps it sort of, like, check and balance itself.
Mm-hmm.
So while it's going on through the development team, and they usually do cleanups of, like, well, this mechanic needs to be changed in these ways, so we need to introduce this other theme, and then so they'll make changes, but they won't to the set as a whole, but they won't usually, like, gut the whole thing. And then over time, those changes become less and less intense. Then it becomes more about changing costs and changing numbers and then individual cards, and then, changing the rares and changing the mythics, and as the commons get locked down for limited play. And then while the developers are doing this, there is a writer assigned to the set, and usually an additional writer to help them. And those those are members of the creative team, where they will be responsible for naming the cards, making flavor text for the cards, writing art descriptions for the cards, and they are just trying to take the cards that development is handing them and say, okay, this is the story we want to tell. These are cool things that we have from the style guide. These are things that we really want to get into the set. They're looking for places to put all of these cool things in the set, essentially. So when you have a set like, okay, well, we have, super cool dragons, where can we put dragons in the set? So when we take a look at, like, the red burn spells, obviously they're looking at places to put dragons. And when we know who the dragon clan leaders are, then we're like, okay, we can put these cool guys on other pieces of art. And they're also the ones that are trying to figure out, like, oh, okay, well, what is still true in Tarkir after the time shift? Let's find cool places to show off pieces of that story. What was the card that did this? I can't remember.
Summit Prowler was identical between cons and dragons.
Yeah, that was another thing. For this set in particular, there was a lot of heavy lifting done by the art to do a lot of those parallels between the two. So they were looking for a lot of places to do stuff like that. So, like, Anafenza, for example, was a parallel between the previous one. Just, it's the same character, but we're putting her in, we're putting her back in the story. So when they made Anafenza, they were essentially just making, like, okay, we need a white legendary creature for the set, and then we're going to make her Anafenza. Then the creative team decided to make her Anafenza. This guy Anafenza may have been, I don't actually remember, may have been a non-legendary creature, and then creative asked for an Anafenza character, and then they figured, okay, well, we have this character who's a rare and is pretty exciting, we can make her Anafenza.
Okay.
So there is some back and forth there. Usually what happens is the development team will say, at certain points they'll be like, okay, we need to have, like, art goes out in waves, so they'll say, like, okay, here's 50 or here's 100 cards from my set that I'm pretty confident will not change all that much. You can go get art for them, and then the creative team the writer will write an art description for it, and then send it off to an artist who will then paint or however they do their art, the art for it, and then we can associate it with the card. So after that, it tends to go to editing. So they're the ones, like, checking text, checking rules. Matt Tabak, who's the rules manager, is also an editor. They're involved in the set towards the end while it's still in development, and then it goes to typesetting, and then there's a bunch of other awesome people that do a lot of work on it. Just, making the booster box copywriting on the side of the box. There's a ton of stuff that goes on.
Right.
But that's sort of the R&D start to finish, is, like, advanced planning to editing is the range at which R&D touches it.
Sweet. When you with your time at Wizards, did you have a chance to work on both design and development?
I did.
And was there one that you preferred to do yourself, or
I like design.
sort of...
So I was part of the. So they need better names for this, but I was a part of the design team of Wizards of the Coast R&D, who made up most of the design teams and led the design teams for sets. So each set has a design team, and Wizards of the Coast R&D has a design team. So I was there doing design, and then there was a process that got introduced not too long before I had gotten there, where every development team has a designer on it, and every design team has a developer on it. And then by crossing over one from each of the other teams, you got somebody with a different perspective to keep track of things and make sure that, like, usually it was when a developer came on the design team, it was to make sure that mechanics weren't wildly off base to the point where, you know, we're making a mechanic that is completely unworkable for the tournament scene. And then when a designer was on the development team, it was about, you know, partially retaining design vision of the set and also being able to generate cards, because designers, their skill set tended to be being able to just churn out bunches of cards and figure out ideas that fit in specific places. So that whenever I was on a development team, I was normally there as that design team rep. To double check to make sure that developers weren't ruining all of the beautiful cards
that you had spent so long working on.
Yeah, it didn't actually end up working out. A lot of the cards got ruined anyway, but
All right, well, let's talk about some cards.
Sure.
Yeah.
So last time you were here, I believe we sort of talked about how you kind of stepped up as Planeswalker guy.
Yes, Planeswalker. I was the Planeswalker guy.
You were the Planeswalker guy. And so for the last... I mean, our viewers can sort of assume that for the last year or two, most Planeswalkers that have seen the light of day were you had a big part of.
Since Gatecrash. Gatecrash was the first one I did. I was on a mini team for Gideon. And then after that, Rald Zarek was kind of... I'd been like kind of... I was on the design team for Dragon's Maze. God, so many dragons.
Yeah.
But yeah, I helped with doing Rald Zarek, and then after that, basically every Planeswalker card that got printed was passed by my desk at some point, because I was trying to keep track of all of their mechanics and make sure they all felt distinct, and that we were leaving room for future characters like Narset, and yeah, so it was a lot of just trying to make sure that the Planeswalkers had identities that were mechanical and showed out in playing, and that, you know, I was giving the tools to development when they had to balance these cards, because Planeswalkers are very, very often end up in Standard just because they're such powerful card types in general. So they needed to have ways of balancing them, and I needed to have ways of making sure they felt like the characters that were being depicted. So I ended up doing a lot of the mediating between them and creative and design, so we could find mechanical spaces that worked for them.
All right, so we have 2 Planeswalkers, correct, in Dragons of Tarkir?
Yep.
Yes.
Let's talk about those ones first.
All right, let's do it.
So which one would you like to lead off with here, Dan?
All right, let's do Narset, because Narset was super awesome. Narset was originally going to be mono blue, I think. When essentially what happens is creative decides, like, okay, here are the 5 characters, because we get 5 Planeswalkers per block. Any more than they start feeling less special, and we start flooding the Standard with them. Any less, and you don't really get to see too many. It's just not enough characters, and who doesn't like more Planeswalkers? So a lot of times what happens, they'll just say, like, okay, here are the 5 Planeswalker cards we're going to do in this set. So for this set, they were like, all right, we're going to do Sarkhan in the first set, Sorin in the first set, although they didn't have Sorin originally. It's supposed to be a different character, but then they got switched out for Sorin. Ugin in the second set, Narset in the third set, and Sarkhan again in the third set. So for this one, I believe they also choose the colors. Development helps in creative choose the colors, just because they want to have a balance of Planeswalker colors in the set, essentially, and they want to make sure that the color identities are normal, or are balanced across the set. Everybody gets some. So for Narset, it used to be mono blue, and then I think it got changed to white. It got changed to white blue. She may have been Jeskai colors for a little while. I forget. But essentially, I actually had a theme for Narset that was completely different than this one, because this one, Narset's theme is play non-creature spells, right? So
Right.
that's kind of her identity. And usually when we designed Planeswalkers, it was all about, find the core of their identity and show it through the card and show it through the mechanics. So her second ability is whenever you cast instant sorceries, she really likes instants and sorceries. First ability is non-creature, non-land, so she's looking for, prowess spells, essentially. And the ultimate makes a reference to non-creature spells. And that's the kind of theme when you start making new characters, you can go out strong and you can say, like, this is what this character is about. So if Narset ever shows up again, you can probably be pretty sure that she's going to do something similar to this. And that, so, every time you see a Narset, it feels like it is Narset, right?
Right.
So that's sort of where this one came from. But when we were making her, she didn't have a theme, right? Narset had never been a Planeswalker before. So we could essentially do whatever we wanted with her. Like, it still had to figure out, does it make sense with Narset, the clan leader? Because she did actually have a card, even though it wasn't a Planeswalker card. But we had to, like, just kind of fit that theme and then give her a theme that we were happy essentially assigning to her for the rest of eternity. Because, we didn't want to, like, make Narset the instant sorcery Planeswalker and then make somebody else the instant sorcery Planeswalker later on down the line.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Actually, I'm curious about the emblems that, just sort of tangentially, the emblems that Planeswalker creates.
Mm-hmm.
That was a big shift over the last couple of years. So, I mean,
in that they generate emblems, or in that
that's sort of the thing that Planeswalkers do when you get to ultimate them these days.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple throughout the last couple of years that do something a little different, but often it's you get an emblem.
Yep.
I'm just curious if you can talk much about the decision to go that route with the Planeswalkers.
Sure. So emblems. So emblems predated me. I think they were just something that was kind of a fix of, we need something cool to do with our Planeswalkers when they create a permanent effect. Kind of like, because Elspeth, the first Elspeth, was eroded to make an emblem, I think. But essentially her first ability was just, for the rest of the game, all of your stuff is indestructible. She didn't make an emblem. And then later on, we realized, hey, we kind of want to keep doing this thing where you get a permanent buff for the rest of the game on these Planeswalker Ultimates, because Planeswalker Ultimates are super awesome, and that when you get them, if you manage to ultimate a Planeswalker, you should feel very powerful and feel very rewarded for it. So a lot of the effects that kept coming up were, for the rest of the game, you blank. And emblems were just a cool thematic way of doing it with Planeswalkers, because we don't actually have a good way of tracking things for the rest of the game. In Magic, it's a paper game. We can't actually say, remember this, remember this, remember this for the rest of the game. So emblems were just a go-between of, put a thing in play that reminds you, and then you can put those emblems in the packs like they ended up doing. Yep. And now you have a visual reminder in front of you. And then emblems just ended up being this... It was decided to make them just like Planeswalker only things, so that they felt special. Like, because you could definitely do a card, like there are definitely cards that could have used emblems because they have until the end of game effects, but they opted away from it because they wanted them to feel special and feel like Planeswalker things. So it's a special Planeswalker only thing that helps in tracking big effects that last throughout the rest of the game. And then when you have, I think it was the second Sorin, he can use emblems in different ways, where it's just a small minus to give yourself a small emblem, right?
Right.
So
Right.
It's a cool little bit of space. I think, like, when I made M15 Garrick, I ended up giving an emblem to somebody else, which was a different piece of information. And did Ob Nixilis do what I think it did?
I don't remember what Ob Nixilis did.
Ob Nixilis, the Black Oath. Yeah, Ob Nixilis gave you an emblem with an activated ability.
Right. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of space in emblems that I had to be very careful about, like using over time. But they're a cool Planeswalker ability, or a cool Planeswalker tool, essentially, that lets you do cool things with Planeswalkers.
Cool. Well, then moving on to the other Planeswalker that doesn't actually have an emblem.
Yep.
But the ultimate is probably one of the best ever.
Yep.
Sarkhan.
Oh yeah, this card was great. So essentially, when I make Planeswalkers, I get the list of Planeswalkers from Creative. I say, okay, these are our 5 guys, and then I grab another designer, I grab a creative person, and I grab a developer, and I sit them in a room and I say, okay, what do we care about these Planeswalkers? I want to do this mechanically. Does anybody have any ideas to do this mechanically? And so when we had both Sarkhans, the first Sarkhan, I knew right away. Like I had made this card a long time ago. I knew for a fact that this Sarkhan would turn into a dragon because it made just perfect sense for the cons one to do that. And then because there were no dragons in the world, so oh my god, I'm shrinking. My chair is broken. All right. So because there were no dragons in the world, and I really like the ability of turning a planeswalker into a dragon, he ended up getting that ability. So because we couldn't actually make dragon tokens because there were no dragons in the world for the cons one, we could sort of blow it out in the third Sarkhan, in the Sarkhan in the third set, so we could just do all of the dragons forever. I'm trying to remember. I distinctly remember. I think he was when I was working on him. He was mono red. The second Sarkhan was like he was like red black or red blue. He was like red green or something like that. I think he was red green when I was working on him.
Okay.
And I made a version of it. He had the same minus and the same ultimate. Because it was like, okay, well, he can make dragon, like, we can make dragon tokens. Making a dragon token is just something that, you know, Sarkhan is the dragon planeswalker. That's his deal. So we want to have references to dragons on him. Making dragon tokens is always fun, and now it'll work with the tribal dragon stuff, and the ultimate is just over the top, go grab all the dragons from the dragon set. Great. So I remember, I distinctly remember Dave Humphreys call me over at one point. He was like, hey Dan, can you look at this Sarkhan and tell me if it's alright? And I walked over to his desk and he showed me, and it was green, red, blue. And I was like, when did Sarkhan become blue? This is super weird. And I looked at all the abilities, and I think it was pretty close to this. It was almost exactly this. And I was like, that seems fine. Why is he blue? Because it just didn't feel. It was super weird. But
did you ever get an answer to that? Because
I think he shrugged and said creative told him to. But I think it was kind of a weird one. Like Sarkhan had this journey of he descended into madness, right? He was Sarkhan Vol, and then he was Sarkhan the Mad. And part of the story is quieting the whispers in his mind. So the idea was that you had Sarkhan in the first set, where he's still kind of a little under Nicole Bolas' effect, and then you had Sarkhan restored in the last one. And I think that, you know, going back to the plan kind of was going back to a Khan's clan. So doing you know, like a teamer color scheme for Sarkhan made sense to creative. I trust them. I don't think it's like a bad idea. It was just very shocking at the time to see like, oh, the dragon guy is now blue. This is super weird to me.
No, that was the element of this card that I like the most, that Sarkhan was out of place when he was born into the Mardu. He was kind of just destined to not fit in there. And that through the course of this journey, he became, you know, who he was supposed to be, or who he had the potential to be, and that articulates itself by his access to blue mana.
Yeah, it's a neat little story, and that's a lot of like what the cool time travel things let you do, is where you can like give him teamer colors in a set without teamer, right? And it's like it tells a very interesting story, and I think it ended up working out really well. It was just one of those like very shocking moments at the time. Like, because especially, like, there are just so many facets of every set, and you have so many people working on it that sometimes somebody's going to make a decision that you're not going to catch until, like, you know, 2 weeks or a month later, and then you're just going to see something and like, oh god, what has happened?
That's cool. All right, so those are the Planeswalkers, both of which are super awesome, and people really like them, so that's cool. Are there any other cards that you sort of had a direct... I mean, I assume there are. You designed the set, so
it's actually kind of hard to get cards when if you're on a design team but you're not the lead. It's very hard to find cards that you made that retain like a lot of what you put into them. There are a couple. I forget I think it was my idea, but Scion of Ugin the colorless dragon. I pushed really, really hard for that card. I really wanted it to be common, because there's just so many, like, being a colorless dragon means it fits in every deck. It was very much about like getting it at common, so we could have cards that at common that interact with all the cool Dragon Matters stuff in the set, and it would be the only common dragon. And I mean, like, and this is where you sort of get into fights in R&D, where like I really wanted, one of the things I really am a little upset that we didn't try was just even more dragons at common and just see how it plays, right? Like there was just a standing rule of no dragons don't end up being, well, dragons in general don't end up being less than 4/4 or 4/3 or something like that. Because I remember Scion of Ugin in an attempt to make it common, it was a 3/4 for a while, and it ended up just not working out at common. I really wish we had tried like a couple of more over the top things with the set, because I think that at the very least you could say you tried it, and if it didn't work, that rather than saying like, no, this is just not how we make Magic sets, or just isn't the way we normally make Magic sets. So like in general, it's probably for the best that this card is an uncommon. I'm just like sad that we didn't put, you know, an extra 8 dragons at common and just see what happened.
I would love that. That would have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things that like it makes there's pluses and minuses. I can definitely see it, but like, who knows? Who knows what it would have been?
Right.
As far as cards that I made, Pitiless Horde is a design that I'm pretty proud of. It's the 2B 5/3. At the beginning of your upkeep, lose 2 life, and it has dash. Because usually, just in general, finding new ways to make mechanics matter, and new ways to analyze your cards always appeals to me. And it just like whenever you see the like Pitiless Horde, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. If I dash this and it goes back to my hand, I don't lose the life on the upkeep. Or I can just play a 3-mana 5/3 that pings me for 2 every turn.
Right.
So it was kind of that cool little, like, hey, here's something new we can do with this mechanic. And I was pretty happy when I found that one made through the set, because it was the design that I looked at and I was like, yeah, okay, I can get behind that. I was pretty happy with that one. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot. I think there's like maybe one more card. I'm not sure. I did the exploit mechanic. The exploit mechanic was my idea. That one I really like a lot. It just in the same way of Pitiless Horde, right? It just has a bunch of different layers to it that, and so this is kind of important when you're designing any game, but having layers of complexity that exist but aren't immediately apparent tends to make the game a little bit easier to learn, right? Like when I teach you what exploit means, like, oh, when you play this, you could sacrifice a creature and you get the effect, right? And you're like, okay, so I can play this guy and sacrifice one of my other guys and get the effect. That's pretty cool. So you get the choice right up. Like, you don't have to do it, so you can just play him and not do it, and that's fine. You can just play 2B, get a 2/3, that's fine. For Minister of Pain, sorry, I'm looking at one of the cards right now. But Minister of Pain, like 2B, make a 2/3. He hangs out on the battlefield. He does the 2 mana, or does the 3 mana 2/3 things, and then exploit. It's like, oh, I can sacrifice a guy and get my 2/3 and get a -1/-1 effect. And then you realize over time it's like, oh no, I can also sacrifice himself, and then I have access to a 2B sorcery that says all my opponent's creatures get -1/-1. That's pretty sweet. And so it's this like layer of like these layers of decisions that don't necessarily speak up to the player at first, where they can kind of, you know, learn as they go when they get to different pieces like that I really like when cards end up like having those different modes, but it's not obvious immediately. Because if it's obvious immediately, like, you know, you can like the modal cards, like you can do this or this or this. It's very much like too many decisions, right?
Right.
And too many of those cards make the set very hard to process. Whereas when you have a card like Minister of Pain, just like, no, okay, I put this card on the battlefield. Do I want to sacrifice a guy for -1/-1? No. okay, cool. I can process this. I don't need to think it all out beforehand. But once you start
Right.
getting used to the cards and you start figuring out, okay, exploit, I get it. I understand all the intricacies of this mechanic. Now it's a lot more like deep a strategic card. So
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed the exploit mechanic a lot.
yeah, that was a cool thing. Like all of the mechanics needed to work with the cons mechanics. That was a big deal. That there was some level of overlap, at least in constructed, because you're never going to play the two mechanics together in limited, right? You're never going to play a deck with delve and with exploit. But it's important
Right.
that for each mechanic that we picked in dragons, that at least in constructed decks would work with the other one. So exploit does that really well. Rebound triggers all the prowess stuff. Bolster triggers all the +1/+1 counters matter stuff in cons.
Mhm.
Formidable overlaps very nicely with the 4 power matters ones. And what was the Marty mechanic? I have no idea.
Raid.
Raid.
Raid, yes. So you have a way of triggering raid multiple times with dash, and then bouncing the creature back to your hand. So you could keep him safe to trigger raid another day.
Cool.
Yeah, it was. I like this set. I think it was.
I am excited to play with this set. I haven't actually had a chance yet.
You didn't go to the pre-release.
I did not, unfortunately. I have in-laws that I have to attend
Appease.
to, or had to attend to.
That's okay.
I have since sent them home, so maybe later today or when it comes out on Mitgo. More likely Mitgo.
More likely Miko.
More likely Mitgo.
There you go.
All right. That's really cool. Well, thank you so much for calling in,
Yeah,
Dan.
not a problem. I had a lot of fun talking about things
That
that
was
I
lovely.
did years ago.
So here's a question.
Okay.
The next set, the next set that comes out, I believe, is Modern Masters 2015. So that's going to be interesting. Did you have any work in that?
I did not.
All right. What about Magic Origins?
I did. I was on the development team for Magic Origins.
Yeah. So, and we already know there are some
Pretty sweet
interesting-
Planeswalker cards, right?
pretty sweet Planeswalkers. I know when Origins was first announced, and it was like, all right, we're going to show you where these Planeswalkers came from, and you're going to see sort of their legendary versions and their Planeswalker versions. It's going to be awesome. And a lot of people are like, oh my God, how are they going to do that? Are there going to be flip cards? No, they'd never do that.
Uh-huh.
That's silly. For sure they wouldn't. And then, oh, wait,
LOL,
no, yeah,
get wrecked.
that's exactly what you crazy SOBs are doing.
Yep, exactly. It's 100% what they're doing. It's awesome. Those were like the hardest cards to design and develop, but they were tons of fun, and I really hope that they. Because I don't actually know the final versions. I left before those final versions were done. So
Awesome.
Well, I'm awaiting to see if they screwed it up.
So, you've seen Liliana.
Yes, that one was one of the harder ones to make because it was actually super. It was super powerful, like the way. Actually, I have to look it up. What was it? Liliana Desperate Healer?
I believe so.
Whatever. Heretical Healer. There we go. Yeah. So whenever a non-token creature you control dies, exile her and then return to the battlefield transformed. It was one of these really weird balancing acts of you want them to be able to flip in games, but you don't. Like Planeswalkers are super powerful. So it was really hard of getting the like, do you make it a really low hoop to get and then make the Planeswalker less cool? Or do you make the hoop like really hard to do and then you have to have a small creature survive for long enough and then once you do you get like the super awesome Planeswalker? And I'm really happy with the way that this one turned out.
Sweet. Okay, well, we won't get into it today because we only know Liliana, and I'm sure we can probably go a lot more in depth when we know what the other four do.
Yep.
So we'll definitely have you back in a couple months when Origins comes out. But in the meantime, thank you again for stopping by the show today.
Not a problem.
Really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you? What do you do with your week?
I do
you
with my
stream
time.
and you're on Twitter and all sorts of
So
stuff.
I do a stream actually for Extra Credits, twitch.tv/Extra Credits, Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 7 o'clock Pacific. We do game design analysis, so we break down games. We talk about the design of them, and there's open Q&A with a question bot that I designed myself that is pretty cool. And on Sundays at 1 p.m. Pacific, we do a team stream where my friend Brett comes over and we talk design of some awesome game. So come check that out. It'll be super awesome.
Sweet. All right. Okay, I think that will do it.
Should I star wipe out? Should I go the other way?
You should star wipe out.
Okay.
Yeah. Get out of here.
Woo!
And he's gone just like that. It's magic. Thank you guys so much for tuning in this week. As always, the Tap Tap Concede podcast is brought to you by you all, supporters of our Patreon at patreon.com/loadingreadyrun. If you don't know what that is, go check it out. It's right down there below. We really appreciate all of your continued support. It has been incredible thus far, and we're looking forward to the rest of the year and the future beyond. Cam, thanks for being on the podcast today. Perilous Mirror, you're a good dude, and you're our number one pick. And we will see you guys next week.